Ideally, democratic politics is an arena of debate about issues of consequence, where the clash of ideas ultimately brings about the best possible solutions to society's problems. However, this ideal model is a bit of a myth, partially because we don't always make rational choices as citizens, and partially because politicians know that voters are easy to persuade and manipulate. Nowhere is this clearer than in the political speech acts of US President Donald Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Indeed, both leaders make routine use of propaganda techniques. But what exactly is propaganda? According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, propaganda is the dissemination of information, in the form of facts, arguments, rumors, half-truths, or lies, to influence public opinion. More specifically, it is the use of symbols, words, and actions to form associations to manipulate what people think. To understand this better, let's consider President Trump's use of classical propaganda techniques, as discussed in Lee and Lee's The Fine Art of Propaganda. First, Trump uses name-calling, usually in an ad hominem capacity, to try to associate people and groups with commonly perceived or stereotypically negative ideas. Trump also uses the transferring technique, for instance, assigning notions of criminality or deviousness with various minority groups, and transferring his notions of self with the very notion of American exceptionalism. Even though Trump is a member of this super elite, he attempts to use a plain folks approach to support his populist brand. Lastly, Trump makes significant attempts to use testimonials to try to develop a positive narrative about himself. Apart from testimonials, Trump uses predominantly negative propaganda techniques to manipulate public opinion in his favor. But this isn't just a practice of the alt-right. Prime Minister Trudeau has also leveraged his fair share of positive propaganda techniques to avoid needing to make rational arguments. Most clearly, Trudeau uses glittering generalities to make his points. These vague platitudes are so over-the-top emotional that they invite their listeners to abandon examination entirely. Trudeau also engages in transferring, assigning the Liberal Party to be the party of all things good and holy about Canada. His use of card stacking, otherwise known as cherry-picking, is also abundantly clear. Lastly, Trudeau uses the bandwagoning technique to encourage voters that he was the only viable alternative to the status quo in the last election. All of these techniques force the agenda further from the realm of facts. But why does this work in politics? Well, studies and reviews, such as Soukup's Political Communication, show that voters are often uninterested in complex political statements. According to Turwell et al., voters are looking for mental shortcuts that are highly emotional in nature, such as perceived trustworthiness, particularly voters who are less interested in politics overall or have less information generally. In this communicative environment, Soukup suggests that first impressions are invaluable for framing opinion, meaning that name recognition and celebrity-like status and appeal can be more important than concrete policy solutions. Finally, according to Kouissas et al., politicians are uniquely situated in power positions to set and develop the agenda. They are uniquely equipped to act as the new propagandists, as Bernays would say in propaganda. What does this all mean? First, it can be seen as inherently undemocratic, as this manipulation creates an undesirable system of persuasion that is difficult to see and critique. Bernays called this sort of phenomenon the invisible government that is developed from propaganda. Moreover, it is no coincidence that these sorts of arguments tend to be anti-analytical in nature. Rocco argues that politicians such as Trump who use propaganda rhetoric are also less likely to listen to expert opinion. Ultimately, it risks creating a politic of infotainment, where we as voters are not really presented with rational and viable choices. All that said, this is obviously a matter of degrees. We as voters can reject this style of politics, and sometimes we do. Moreover, in a democracy, these tactics are never infallible, and do not lead to unabashed consolidation of power due to the general strength of existing institutions such as the courts, constitutions, or the Crown in Canada's case. By analyzing the speech acts of Trump and Trudeau, it's clear that elements of propaganda are used to replace factual, rational arguments. To help encourage good policymaking and rational governance, we need to remain vigilant against these sorts of behaviors and encourage our political leaders to stick to the facts. Thanks for listening.